Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is Societal Narcissism. This video is sponsored by contribution from Joan. Joan gave a general contribution, which I'll use for this video. So we have another one. This video from Joshua Coleman, PhD, handling disrespect and abuse from your adult alienated children. You see, just the title of the video, I haven't seen any of this, I haven't watched any of this. Just by the title of the video, I can already predict that this guy is completely and totally full of shit. Because if you're alienated, which means basically no contact, you're not alienated. You've been gone no contact with. So if you're no contact, if you're talking to parents that have been gone no contact with, where is the disrespect and abuse coming from? How are you being abused and being disrespected if there's no contact? What are you handling? You're not handling anything other than giving cover for likely abusers whose children had finally said, enough is enough, I want you out of my life. Now he has 11,600 subscribers. This video is 11 months old, has 147,000 views. This is what I'm telling you. Our abusers are eating this shit up. They're eating this shit up. So, let's get into it, shall we?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a webinar on the topic of handling disrespect and abuse from your alienated or estranged adult child. And I think this is one of the really tricky things for parents to handle, particularly these days, because so many of the parents that I work with were really loving, involved, dedicated, committed parents who in many ways were much better parents than were their own. And if they weren't better, they were probably as good as parents as were their
A majority of the people you work with were good parents. Like, how could that? We know that's not even possible. We know it's not. So everybody who's come to you is legitimately alienated and they were good parents. How could you possibly know that? How?
own. So when their child starts talking to them,
And again, we're not talking about parental alienation where the child is a minor, is a juvenile. We are talking about adults who have made the decision to go no contact with their parents. There's a big difference between no contact and parental alienation.
or behaving towards them in a disrespectful or abusive way, it's very confusing to them, particularly because older parents, of which I would consider myself in that camp of being a boomer, but also the next generation.
Well, I'm glad he said it. Boomers. He's dealing with boomers. And he said multiple parents. So 2-parent boomers. So we're not talking about a situation of parental alienation.
Below me, youth-wise Gen X parents, were still raised in an era where the idea of honoring thy mother and thy father, respecting your elders, and that kind of a moral framework was still considered reasonable and popular and common. And all of that has largely given way to a much more psychological, individualistic idea of family. So there's no longer the feeling that the child owes the parent anything. They don't owe them respect. They don't have to.
No, we could see, and there it is. There's the boomer mindset right there. And again, if you're not this type of boomer, don't be offended because I'm not talking about you. They don't like that they're not owed anything. You don't owe your parents anything if they have abused you. They want to stay. They don't like that things have changed. And by things changing, meaning there are channels like mine and others where the jig is up. The jig is up with the whole narcissism thing, with the whole personality disorder thing. That we understand we don't have to take this bullshit anymore, and they don't like it.
Honor them because they're older. So what that does is that it opens up an enormous opportunity for adult children and their spouses.
So you're supposed to honor them because they're your parents and they're older. This is the mindset. 147,000 views. I know you don't like it. I know these abusers, they don't like it. They don't like it. They want it to go back to how it was. And that's just not how it's going to be anymore.
To treat the parent in ways that none of us would have treated our parents in all likelihood. I guess some of us might have. But
too bad. Too bad. You don't like it. You don't like you getting treated differently than your parents. Things change. The internet opened up a whole world for abuse victims to talk, to share their stories, to realize that they're not alone, that the abuse is not unique, and that we don't have to take it.
Been far less common in our generation to have spoken to our parents once we were adults, or for our spouses to have spoken to their in-laws in the ways that so many commonly do. So one of the reasons that I think this is an important topic for parents to who are going through estrangement and alienation to get informed about is that a lot of parents today are very confused about this topic. So, if you're like most of us, you may have made mistakes with your kids when they were growing up or since they...
There we go. We all make mistakes. They all are running the same playbook. We all make mistakes. And this guy's a PhD. Dr. Joshua Coleman. Man, I wish there was a common denominator with all these people. Unfortunately, there isn't.
They've been an adult, and you may be confused about how much of your children's anger, or hurtful comments you deserve or don't deserve. Some parents have a difficult time, particularly these days, distinguishing abuse from appropriate anger. As being humans, we sometimes do things that may feel provocative or disrespectful to our kids, and they may feel like they have a right to be angry at us, or it's appropriate for them to be angry. And we may be confused about, well, what is an appropriate amount of anger versus what is an inappropriate amount of anger. I think
that's not your call. See, that's your thing. It's not their call to decide what is an appropriate amount of anger for us to have towards them. You don't get to abuse us. It's not a mistake. You don't get to abuse us and then tell us how to get over it, when to get over it, how deep our anger should run or our hurt should run. They think they're entitled to that, and they're not, and they're confused by it.
Many, if not most, parents who are going through an estrangement or alienation don't know how to set limits without shutting down the conversation. And if you've been following my work at all, you know that one of the most important things to be practiced at when you're going through this kind of an experience is to learn how to keep the conversation open and going forward. I once took an a class on improv, and one of the key techniques of improv is that if somebody says something to you, you say, yes, and the idea is that you're constantly finding ways to keep the conversation or the interaction going. So you might not, somebody says something, you don't just say no.
That's called gaslighting. That's called gaslighting. You don't need improv skills if your child is telling you how you abused them and hurt them. What you're doing is giving more gaslighting skills. That's all that is.
Or correct or whatever. You have to kind of find a way to keep the conversation going.
Exactly. They want to keep the conversation going because, as I said, the longer you talk, the more they can twist things, turn it around, and make you feel like you're the problem. The only way you win is not to play the game. You got a doctor here giving gaslighting tips, calling it improv. An improvisation exercise. No, dude, you're just teaching sociopaths how to gaslight their abuse victims.
So much of what is required of parents when they're going through estrangement and alienation is finding the tools to not shut down the conversation. And we're probably the most challenged when our kids are being disrespectful or abusive because we feel so hurt and misunderstood and activated, and particularly if it's a case of alienation and we think that the other parent.
You feel just being stood up to and being told about your abuse is disrespect, defiance. It isn't. You're not alienated. You're estranged. Big difference. You can't be alienated from an adult child who chooses not to talk to you. You are estranged.
Is involved, and that our child is just parroting or mimicking back something that they've heard before in the past. So part of the task is to allow.
They're just now, and again, your abuse isn't real. You're just parroting back or mimicking something somebody else told you. But they're going to sit here and call you disrespectful when all they want to do is disrespect your feelings, disrespect your past, and disrespect your recovery. All this is an exercise in gaslighting.
These feelings to be expressed, but to not support the child being contemptuous or to communicate their feelings in a way where we're just kind of giving them an open door to be abusive or more contemptuous of the parent. Again, these are not small tasks psychologically. They require a lot.
And I don't know what he's talking about here, because if you're estranged or alienated, that means your child isn't talking to you. That means they have no contact with you. So what are these conversations you're talking about? See, what he's doing is he's trying to give them tactics to hoover them back in. If for the chance that a child does try to reach out and call them out, for the parent to be prepared to gaslight them and put them back in what they think is their place.
A lot of calm and centeredness and the ability to be in touch with your own emotions and in control of your own emotions and not come from a very activated, reactive place. Many parents are confused, particularly if they feel not only that their ex is causing the disrespect or abuse, but sometimes it's who our children are married to. If our kids are married to what I call a cult of one son-in-law or daughter-in-law, or a gatekeeper son-in-law or daughter-in-law, somebody who's very troubled, who is really encouraging.
A cult, a gatekeeper, again, invalidating your entire experience and your feelings, blaming it on someone else. It can't be. It's got to be somebody else poisoning their mind, because it can't be me. It can't be.
Your kid to be disrespectful or abusive as an expression of kind of loyalty to them. It was a way to show them that, they're going to protect them from the parent's so-called abusive, intrusive behavior. This is something I see a lot with daughters-in-law, where they kind of threaten the sons, the now estranged sons, attachment to the parent by criticizing their masculinity, by saying things like, "Oh, well, you're a mama's boy," or you need to protect our family now that we have children, and protect my mental health, and it's stressful for me to be around your parents, and you need to.
Yeah, yes. See, this is the boomer telling you we come first. Yeah. When you have your own family, when you have your own wife and children, it is your responsibility to protect them. They come first. This is what they don't want to deal with. What woman wants to compete for her husband with his mother, with his parents, when he's got a family of his own to raise? This is what these boomers don't understand, because they think they're entitled to it all.
To show them that when they talk to me that way, they can't do that. And so sometimes these perfectly nice, sweet, kids who have never had a fight with their parents in their life and probably wouldn't have if they'd married somebody different, suddenly become very aggressive and contemptuous of the parent, not because they necessarily.
You mean when somebody points out you're being abused, you're being manipulated? When a spouse helps a husband, when a wife helps a husband get out of the control of their mother, that's somehow a problem.
Necessarily have some big complaint about the parent. They're doing it in a kind of a performative way. They're doing it to sort of show their wife that they're going to protect her and her honor, and they're not going to.
It's performative, meaning it's not real. You're just putting on an act for your wife. No accountability whatsoever.
Be pushed around themselves. So that can be a point that's also incredibly confusing to parents. Parents who have low self-esteem.
I'm sure it is confusing when you've been getting away with this abuse for decades, and finally the child says, as an adult with his own family, says, "You know what? Enough's enough. I have my own family, I have my own wife, I have my own children. They take priority. Not with these boomers. Not with these boomers. No, we come first. This is just a performance. This isn't real. You're under the thumb of your wife. Bullshit.
Or who have confusion about how they're supposed to be treated by anybody. So let's say you came from a family where abuse was very common from your parents or other family members, where there was trauma or rejection or shame or other kinds of experiences where you've come into adulthood not really knowing what you're entitled to expect from anybody. So when your adult child is disrespectful or abusive, it almost feels like your fate. You almost feel like it's how you're supposed to be.
So the boomer might have come from a family that was abusive and neglectful or hateful, okay? But there's no way they pass that along to their children, right? It's all about them. It's all about me. Nope, skip the generation. I was wonderful. They went no contact. No. No, that's not how it works. It's not how any of this works. And he knows that.
Treated in life. And so you may feel scared about how you're being treated, or you may react way too aggressively. But it all comes because those more long-standing feelings of hurt and trauma and feeling misunderstood by your own family are getting stirred up again. And nothing is...
So the poor boomer's been abused by their own family growing up, and now they're being abused again. And they're all it's all fear. They're just afraid. Not that they're abusive. They're just afraid because of their abuse. Their abuse is real. Okay? Their abuse is real. That happened. Yours is performative. You're under the influence of someone else. The only way you win is not to play the game. 147,000 views on this video. 147,000 views. 4,300 likes. It's got a decent amount of dislikes, 1.4K. So obviously there must be people calling him out on this. 2,268 comments of people giving it information of how to play themselves the victim and invalidate their children's abuse.
So provocative or so hurtful or so rejecting or so humiliating or so shaming than to be told by our own children that we're terrible parents or terrible people, or when they behave in ways that cause us to feel like we've done something.
But what if you are terrible people? What if you are bad parents, which most of you are? Then what? Do you even open up to the possibility? No. You said most of your subscribers, they're all good parents and all good people. Really? Really?
Something so terrible that we should or could be treated in such a hurtful, disrespectful manner. So I think it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time talking about what is abuse and what isn't abuse, because there are parents sometimes today who say that behavior...
He's going to tell us what is and isn't abuse. He's going to tell them. He's going to tell these abusers what they can accept as abuse and not abuse when their children tell them what the problem is. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Is abusive in ways that I might consider to be obnoxious or difficult or stressful to have to listen to or engage in, or shaming or rejecting. It doesn't really mean it's abusive, though. Just because when our children tell us these things, it makes us feel like a truck just backed up on us, doesn't necessarily mean that their intention is to be abusive or even to be hurtful. Sometimes our children tell us things that make us feel terrible about ourselves as people and as parents, because they're actually trying to have a closer relationship with us. They're trying to communicate something they don't know any other way to communicate, or we've made it so difficult for them to say what they need to say that they're just getting louder and louder and louder to try to break through our defenses. So just because it feels bad doesn't necessarily make it abusive. It might, but it's not the only sign.
Well, I'll give him that. I'll agree with that.
And also, if you intervene too quickly against your child's negativity or anger, particularly if you've been estranged and they're coming back into contact with you, it can backfire, because sometimes you have to give them more room to really spell out how they think and feel, so they know that you can tolerate that before you intervene and begin to set limits. This is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the webinar. But on the other hand, some adult children are really out of control. They're out of control in their contempt for the parent, in their rejection of the parent, in their double standards. So many of adult children today talk about the parent's abuse, and the adult child is incredibly abusive. They're abusive in their neglect of the parent, in preventing the parent from seeing the grandchildren when the grandparents were loving and involved and caring.
Says who? That's up to the parent whether or not the grandparent sees the children. How do you know? How do you know you're not giving weapons, abuse weapons, to sociopaths?
Abusive in the way that they aren't forgiving of the mistakes that the parent made, when they're not really acknowledging the trials that the parent had to go through in raising the child, how much the child themselves might have created challenges, how much the person that maybe it's your ex or the person your child is married to, or the child's mental illness, etc. How all of those things really affect the parenting environment. So parents genuinely do the best that they can, given who they're married to at the time they're raising their children, who their kid eventually marries, what the child's mental health or illness is like, what the child's other challenge.
Child's crazy, their mental health, their illness. Know what I haven't heard here? Accountability and apologies. Nothing.
Are the parent's socioeconomic class, who the other siblings are, what the other kind of social or environmental challenges that the parent had. And so for adult children to just feel like, well, I didn't like how you treated me, so I can be as obnoxious and critical and cruel and rejecting and shaming and humiliating to you as I like to be. Well, no, that's not a sign of a mature person. So it's reasonable that you would want to set limits on that behavior.
Well, then don't cry about it. Then don't cry that you've been got no contact with and that you're estranged. If you think your child's actually abusive toward you, then keep him out of your life. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about adult alienated children and estranged children. These are children who have nothing to do with these people. Again, what are you talking about?
But you can't shut it down in the way that you might other kinds of abusive behavior. You can't do what I call return fire with fire. That's because your goal is to find the kernel of truth even in the obnoxious behavior and find a way to keep the conversation going. All right, so what is abuse? So I gave you some examples. Other is what I would consider to be the willful or reckless infliction of emotional or mental suffering of another person that involves any of the following: shame, humiliation, ridicule, name calling. While any of those could be tolerated if they occur rarely or only on rare occasion, they shouldn't be tolerated if they become part of the ongoing interaction between the parent and the adult child. I mean, it's obvious the ways that it's harmful to the parent. For the parent, it makes them feel ashamed, guilty, regretful, angry, misunderstood, hurt, scared. But it's also bad for the adult child who's doing it as well. Well, why would it be bad for them? I mean, they're getting it off their chest, aren't they? I mean, don't we talk so much in our society about the importance of calling it like it is and saying what you feel and, being direct? Well, no, there's responsible ways to communicate and there's irresponsible ways to communicate. So
we're the abuse victims here. Again, most of these people deserve the scorn, deserve the anger, because our anger is righteous. And all you're doing is trying to figure out a way to steal our righteous anger from us. Not going to happen. You don't like it, maybe you should have been better to your children.
When we allow the adult child to consistently communicate in an irresponsible way, in a clearly abusive way, it's harmful to them. It's harmful because
if they're consistently being disrespectful and communicating with you, how are you estranged or alienated? What are you talking about? These are all he's giving you tactics. He's giving these estranged parents tactics in the just in case the child breaks no contact and comes at him again and comes at the parent and tries to lay out what the problem was, why there no contact, which is futile, which is an exercise in futility. But all he's doing is giving gaslighting techniques to hoover these kids back in. To hoover these, now they're not kids, they're adults, these adult children back in who have made the decision to put their families first, their well-being first, ahead of these boomers. And they don't like it.
Even the most self-righteous kid knows at some level, typically, that they're behaving in an abusive way, and that can induce feelings of guilt.
So we know we're actually the abuser. Do you see where this is, how projection works? Everything they accuse you of is what they are doing. They're accusing us of projection. Oh, Lord.
Regret in them, and that becomes kind of a feedback loop where they criticize the parent, they're abusive of them, they see that it wounds the parent, then they feel guilty about it, and they have to justify why they did it.
This is projection. Understand something, guy. We don't feel guilty. Very few of us, once we've gone no contact and the fog of abuse lifts and we get the clarity, the guilt is gone. There is no guilt. The guilt you're talking about is yours. And it's not even guilt. It's fear of consequences. It's fear of exposure that you're really talking about. Because very rarely do these people feel guilty about anything. They feel entitled. They didn't talk like that to their parents, and then this new thing, and now these kids are fighting back. They don't like it. This is an entitlement thing.
And they justify it by basically cycling through all the reasons they estranged themselves in the first place, and they work themselves up. So they're kind of in a constant state.
We didn't work that cycling through work. No, we're telling you why we went no contact. You were neglectful, you were abusive, you were verbally abusive, you were sexually inappropriate, you were competitive, you were sabotaging, you were controlling. Somehow now this is cycling for ourselves to make ourselves feel better for going no contact because we somehow feel guilty about it. I mean, you gotta laugh. You gotta laugh. I mean, it'd be really funny if there weren't 147,000 views on this video.
Of agitation. So it creates a cycle of anger, guilt, regret, and justifying the anger. But it can also create a certain degree of contempt.
We don't need, once we go no contact, we don't need our anger to be justified anymore. We know our anger is right. We know where we're coming from. The only people seeking justification for any of this is you and the people who followed you and are watching and commenting to your videos.
For the parent if they tolerate too much of it. If you've heard other of my webinars, one of my webinars is called Should I Keep Trying or Just Give Up? And in that webinar, one of the things that I say is that one of the clear signs that you should give up is if you're getting letters returned, to them or to the grandchildren, unopened or gifts.
Yeah.
If you're having restraining orders sent out after you, as some parents are. If you're being told to only communicate through their attorney. If you're having,
how are you getting restrained? Understand something. You can't just slap a restraining. It's real hard. It's not as easy as you think to slap a restraining order on a parent. Believe me, we tried. Go listen to Phone Call with Narcissistic Mother, where my mother made repeated death threats to Charlene. Repeated death threats in an 11-minute phone call. And nobody would touch it. The cops, the prosecutor, the judge, nothing. They didn't even want to hear about it. If you actually have a restraining order as a parent against you from your children, you fucked up. You fucked up.
The police called on you or the threat of it, or every time that you do reach out to the adult child, you get threats of, or they just get so.
And everything else he's talking about, returned letters, unopened gifts, just shows you're not being abused. You've been gone no contact with. What are you talking about here? What are you talking about? You're talking about in case the child, the adult, gets to a point where they want to get something off their chest, and you're giving projection tactics, gaslighting tactics. That's what's going on here.
So unraveled and aggressive and difficult that it makes you just feel like that's really not a worthwhile thing to do. Those are clear signs that you need to stop right now. And often that can work for the following reasons. One is that it goes to what I was saying about it can create contempt for you if you keep trying, despite the fact that your child has made it clear that you shouldn't be trying. So they may actually respect you more if you, the same way that setting limits may cause them to respect you more. It may also cause them to respect you more if you don't keep trying no matter what. So that could be a really important point.
You mean like don't violate the boundaries that we've set up? That's all we're asking. Don't violate our boundaries. We don't want you in our life. Stay out of it.
They invite more self-reflection in the same way that setting limits can. So that your child may feel more like they have to look at themselves than if we just tolerate all the abuse. It may cause them to miss the parent more. It may change the dynamic in some kind of way. Now,
I promise you, the longer you stay no contact, the easier it is to stay no contact. Because you're not there to gaslight us anymore. I have yet to talk to anybody who said you were wrong. Boy, I miss my parents. Boy, I wish I could go running back. I'm sorry, there was one person I could think of who broke no contact and said, that was it. In all the videos I've done, and all the people I've helped, one person I can think, one.
A child who's disrespectful of the parent, I often see this dynamic occur with mothers and daughters, particularly single mothers or formerly single mothers and their daughters. And I think it has to do with the way that daughters in particular can feel more responsible for their mother's feelings, more guilty if the mother is unhappy, more worried about them.
Or the daughter was being competed with. The mother brought in a bunch of, rode the cock carousel, bringing in one guy after another who did God knows what to the daughter with the mother's full knowledge, but the mother was more concerned with her own dick and attention than the welfare of her child, of her daughter.
The way that they defend against that is to be more critical and negative. Now that sounds kind of paradoxical, doesn't it? You might think, well, if they're so worried about the parent, why wouldn't they behave in a nice way? Well, they're behaving in a not nice way because for whatever reason they feel the need to be separate from the parent. But the more wounded that the parent acts, particularly the mother in this particular scenario that I'm talking about, the more wounded she acts, the more upset, the more kind of helpless before the daughter's more aggressive communication, the more guilt that induces in the daughter and causes her to feel like, oh, I'm just this terrible person to make my poor mother cry.
See, this is all guilt tripping. This is all delusions, them thinking that we feel guilty, hoping we feel guilty. That somehow that if they put on the act, the performative, who's talking? I mean, he's accusing us, in the scenario he gave the husband under the control of the wife, putting on a performative act. But everything he's talking about here is a performative act. They accuse you of what they are doing. Classic projection.
Well, you deserve it because of X, Y, or Z, or when I was growing up, you didn't do A, B, or C, or whatever it is. It invites them.
What's X, Y, or Z? Again, more vagaries. What's X, Y, or Z? What's A, B, or C? Neglect, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, competition, name calling, sabotage. X, Y, or Z, A, B, or C. What are we talking about here? They'll never tell you. None of these channels that do this will tell you what the fucking accusations are you're talking about. 17 minutes in, and I understand I'm playing this at 1.25 speed. 17 minutes, 10 seconds in, you still haven't heard one accusation. Vague. Which is how they like it.
Them to justify their behavior in ways that if the parent does set limits on it and shows that they aren't going to tolerate that abusive and disrespectful behavior, actually can be kind of relieving to that kid, because sometimes kids are, adult children, they're out of control, and they know they're out of control, but they kind of can't help themselves. So for those,
we can't help themselves. We know they're out of control. What he's talking about is, like I said, the boomers hold you to an adult standard as a child and never allow you to grow up. So what is he talking about here? He's talking about an adult child going and saying, you abused me, you beat me, you ignored me, you pulled my hair, you called me names, you humiliated me, you competed with me, you accused me of hitting on your boyfriends. And what he's hoping for is that power still has enough what would you call it? Has enough ability to scare the child as an adult, as the parent, to scare you into compliance, to bully you into compliance, to put you back as an adult to that 7-year-old, to that 8-year-old, to that 10-year-old, to have that type of power over you. That's what he's banking on. That's what he's hoping for. That's what he's telling these people to do. He's doing it in a nice, calm way, but that's exactly what he's saying.
Setting limits on the disrespectful and abusive behavior can be kind of relieving in the same way with our
and it will be relieving for us because they know what's best for us. How pandering. How pandering can you get? Just sanctimonious bullshit.
Toddlers, when they were toddlers, they don't necessarily want reign of the house. They want to know where the line is. Our adult children, similarly, they want to know where the line is.
So we're like toddlers. Do you see? You're never allowed to grow up with these people. Your feelings aren't real. Like it's just they all operate the same playbook.
Okay. Well, so what are some of the most common reasons that a child might behave in a disrespectful or abusive way? Well, one is that certainly the parent's mental illness, but equally commonly the adult child's mental illness, or their drug or alcohol abuse, or the effect of who their kid is married to, the son-in-law or the daughter-in-law, or the effect of your ex, or unresolved anger about the past behavior that has never really been addressed or amended or worked through. So
all excuses. All he's giving is excuses why you're acting like this. All excuses of why they're not responsible. They didn't abuse you. You're crazy. It's somebody else.
Well, let's look at all of these in a little more detail. Let's start with mental illness. When I did one of my studies with a colleague at Ohio State, one of the things we found in working with estranged mothers was that a pretty significant number of the mothers, and we interviewed 1,000 of them, who were estranged from the adult child, were alienated. A significant percentage said that they believed that their child's mental illness was part and parcel of the estrangement, and inclusive of that would be the disrespectful and abusive.
They've been calling us crazy since we were kids. They were desperate to get us on some kind of medication, get us taken away, have us committed. Because once you're deemed crazy, nobody has to listen to you.
Behavior. Now, how or why could mental illness increase the probability of a child communicating in a way that's disrespectful or abusive? Well, one is that the mental illness might interfere with their ability to regulate their thoughts, their feelings, or their affect.
What mental illness? What mental illnesses are we talking about here? Who gets to diagnose the mental illness? You? The parent?
But the key uh, diagnostic sign of somebody who we call borderline personality is the symptom of dysregulation. And dysregulation is when once a feeling gets triggered or
We're the borderlines, not them. Not them, not the boomers, not the most narcissistic sociopathic generation ever. It's us. I told you they were going to project. I told you they were going to get a hold of our vernacular and take over the space. And that is exactly what's happening.
thought gets triggered, the person has a very hard time kind of getting the genie back in the bottle. It just sort of spins more and more out of control. So what might be irritating to one person or might be upsetting to one person that has like a
they're talking about themselves here. They're telling on themselves. This is all projection.
life of maybe an hour or two for somebody who's borderline or has some other form of mental illness. It could last for days or hours. And with people with borderline personality disorder, some of the worst, most difficult, most provocative behaviors are all attempts to try to get the genie back in the bottle, to try to feel better. So sometimes people who have that diagnosis may self-harm, or they may be very black and white in their thinking, because the gray zone is where anxiety lives. So if you think of people as all good or all bad, you don't have to think about, what their intentions were. They were really great intentions, or they were terrible intentions. So mental illness may cause somebody to treat the parent in an abusive, disrespectful way because their feelings are so overwhelming to them.
Meanwhile, most of these people, most of them have borderline personality disorder. They're the borderlines. They're the narcissists. Yet they're now that they've been around and they've learned the vernacular, they are now going to turn it and accuse you of being what they are.
Now, one of the things that I found is it's not just kids who have more, and when I say kids, I mean adult kids, your kid. It's not just those who have really serious forms of mental illness that can cause this kind of dysregulation. Somebody who has a mild or moderate anxiety or depressive disorder may be easily triggered by the parent and cause them to react or to overreact, because it doesn't take much to set them off, in part because they're chronically feeling somewhat psychologically underwater. So it doesn't take much for the parent to make them feel guilty or bad about themselves. And so when they're reacting in an abusive or disrespectful way, it's in part in reaction to how bad it makes them feel if the parent says whatever the parent's saying, things which might be totally benign to one of their other adult children or to an objective bystander. So sometimes mental illness can just cause some adult children to be like they're walking around with a third-degree burn, and it doesn't take very much for them to feel really triggered and upset by the parent for them to respond.
Who burned them? Who burned them? See, there's a difference between what you're talking about, personality disorder, and PTSD, CPTSD. See, we're dealing with the effects of your abuse, not actually being an abuser. Zero responsibility on their end. Zero responsibility. They accuse you of being what they are.
Respond in this very aggressive way. Another way that mental illness can cause that is that it may interfere with their ability to make correct attributions of causality from the parent's behavior to how they feel. It may cause them to rewrite their history in lines with something that makes their present day experience feel more aligned. We live in a culture and a society that's obsessed with traumas, and where we assume that if a child comes into adulthood and they have significant anxiety or depression or
so we're obsessed with trauma because of society, not because you actually caused trauma, because we're mentally ill, because we have the personality disorders that you don't have. No, the personality disorders are all ours.
Problems with their confidence, their self-esteem, or other forms of success, that if they have significant challenges, well, it can all be dialed back to mom or dad. Well, yeah, sometimes it can be, but sometimes it's just genetics, or it's random good luck or bad luck, or it's relationships with siblings or with other people or other life circumstances. So this idea that it all boils down to mom or dad really heats up relationships between parents and adult children, because so many adult children are blaming their parents for things that the parent either didn't do or isn't the cause of their adult child's suffering, no matter what their therapist is saying. But we live at a time.
So if you got a therapist that understands narcissism, it isn't. Doesn't matter what the therapist or whoever, you're mentally ill. It's not the parents. Even though they're in therapy saying, this is what happened to me as a child. No, that's not real. No, that's not real. More gaslighting. More invalidation. this is how they work. This is how they've always worked.
When that idea that parents are the primary cause of adult outcome, it's such a powerful idea that a lot of adult children, particularly those who have moderate to severe mental illness, feel justified in criticizing.
He's really laying on that mental illness. He's really, because once you're crazy, understand, once they can call you crazy, you never have to be listened to. Anything that comes out of your mouth is invalid because you have a mental illness.
To the parent and being abusive to them and treating them in a really hurtful way. So the other side of that is that somebody who has subtle or overt mental illness may feel very defective, probably does feel somewhat or a lot defective or shamed as a person. And so blaming the parent is a way to say, well, it's not my fault. I feel this way. It's your fault. So from that perspective.
Yeah, it is. It is your fault. It is your fault. This is what you don't. This is just all just giving cover to abusers so for them to flip it back on us. And I'm telling you, if you're no contact with your parents, if you're no contact with your mother, your father, whoever, there's a good likelihood that eventually they're going to find channels like this and have these tactics just waiting for you, just loaded up in the off chance that you decide to break no contact and reconcile and fix this. It's unfixable. These people will go to any length to alleviate themselves of any responsibility of their actions. We're just mistakes. Nobody's perfect. We didn't know any better. There was no manual. Again, we still haven't heard one real accusation from any of these estranged children. Not one. Not one of these channels, not one of these people has said, if you're being accused of physical abuse, of mental abuse, of name calling, of sexual abuse, of neglect, none of it. X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C, they got mental illness.
The anger, the aggression, the contempt, the self-righteousness, the blame, the disrespect is fueled by this desire or this need to get those feelings of self-criticism and shame and defectiveness off of them. Mental illness in your adult child make it harder for them to just manage the normal, expectable slings and arrows of family conflict, of adult child conflict. So it may mean that they can't just sort of do the basic things that maybe your other adult children can do if you have adult children that you're not estranged from. So they may just, find that the normal things like whatever, asking them to repay a loan, or if they've moved back in for a while to do their share of that housework or be responsible, or any of the other millions of things that constitute adult parent-child relationships, they experience it as some huge disruption to them and overreact from that perspective. Similarly, it may cause them to have very unrealistic expectations about what they're entitled to receive from the parent by way of emotional support or financial support. Their mental illness may cause them to feel like the parent owes them something completely out of line with what the parent really does owe the adult child. So it may cause them to make demands of the parent for money or other forms of emotional restitution that are completely unreasonable and impossible for the parent to deliver. Drugs and alcohol are another common reason why an adult child might be disrespectful or abusive.
Sure, could be. What is the child trying to mask with the drugs and alcohol? Usually it's an abusive past. Who abused them? Not me. You're just mentally ill. Probably because mental illness. That's why you're on drugs and alcohol. That's why you're trying to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. Not because of anything we did. Because you're crazy. You have mental illness.
The effect of the drugs may create mood swings, or when they're coming down from the drugs, that may cause them to be more irritable, more withdrawn, more reactive, more sensitive. The drugs may also may trigger major depression or anxiety disorders, or even bipolar if they're taking hallucinogens, for example. And if they have some kind of a vulnerability to that, it may trigger a bipolar episode. Addicts and alcoholics famously are much more likely to externalize through blaming others. That's why AA and other 12-step programs really emphasize taking responsibility, looking at your own character flaws, making amends, That, those are such.
Right. But you don't want to take any responsibility. You don't want to take any responsibility, but you expect everyone else to.
Key components of 12-step programs because they really work and they actually invite much more responsible communication for the adult child to look at their own behavior and not just blame and shame the parent and say, well, it's your fault that I have all these things. No, in 12-step programs, they encourage people to say, well, these are my character flaws and let me make amends to you for how they impacted you. That's part of the brilliance of 12-step programs. Finally, somebody who's an addict or alcoholic may develop a peer group of people who were similarly estranged or similarly contemptuous of parents and who invite estrangement and no contact and treating parents in these kind of contemptible ways where the parent is treated like a terrible person. And the peer group, which may be an online peer group, become cheerleaders in this kind of an unhinged kin kind of a way. So far I've talked about the role of mental illness and the role of alcohol and drugs in increasing disrespect and abuse. But another common one that I was just touching on earlier is the effect of your son-in-law or your daughter-in-law, which is very common. And that typically happens when the son-in-law or daughter-in-law needs your adult child to fight with you as a way to reassure him or her of the unique place in your child's life. They may also place your child in a loyalty bind where they can only feel secure if your child is rejecting of you, not only through estrangement.
It's their insecurity, not yours, right? It's their insecurity. Again, it's everybody else's fault but their own. Everyone else is to blame except them. And you, it's the drugs, it's the alcohol, it's the spouse, it's the ex, it's the therapist. You have no ability to make a clear decision on your own, according to these people. And then they wonder why you don't like them. They wonder why you don't want them around anymore.
But through criticism and abuse and disrespect. Your daughter-in-law or son-in-law may be abusive themselves, and they may encourage your child to do that, and your child may have to do it as a way to prove to that very troubled son-in-law or daughter-in-law that they're not going to be pushed around in the same way that...
It's always somebody else. It's always somebody else. Because you're just an idiot. Incapable of being right about anything. Incapable of being able to make a good choice on your own. You have to be being manipulated by someone else. Because it can't be anything we did, right?
The son-in-law or daughter-in-law is saying that they're not going to be pushed around. So the daughter-in-law or son-in-law can be a very common problem, and it is not at all unusual that a kid prior to marriage was really nice to the parents, and after marriage they start taking on the behavior and the personality of the person that they're married to in ways that make them somewhat unrecognizable to the parents and the extended family. They went from being a nice, respectful person to a hostile, contemptuous, disrespectful.
Right, because once you have your own family, you're probably a lot less likely to let the abuse continue. Like you say, enough is enough. And when you see, not only are you dealing with your spouse, you're seeing your spouse's family. And if the spouse's family is a normal and actually loving family, you realize how broken and how screwed up the people who raised you and abusive actually are. But this is just untoward manipulation, untoward influence over the adult child. Not that the adult child is seeing things clearly for how they really are and trying to put a stop to it.
Even abusive person. And typically when that's the case, it's because they're sort of performing for the son-in-law or the daughter-in-law. They're proving to them they're...
More performance, more nothing you do is real. Like, this is why you don't go back, people. This is why. Do you see how many tactics this guy has pulled out, given to these sociopaths? Just imagine your abuser, who you've got no contact with, watching this video. Imagine it. Imagine them watching this video, studying this video, and having all these friggin' excuses and tactics to use against you. in the off chance you decide you think, forgiveness or reconciliation or you only have one set of parents. Bullshit. This is what's waiting for you. This shit is what's waiting for you. It should horrify you. If you have that thought to go back, just think, what if they saw one of these videos? What if they're a part of one of these support groups? And there's a good chance they are. Think about how many tactics they're being given by these people to then they're just lying in wait. Just lying in wait for you to come knocking on the door. Don't do it. The only way you win is not to play the game.
Their primacy in the adult child's life. They're showing them that they're the most important person, and in identifying with them, they're also showing them that they like that behavior and they're not going to challenge it or push it aside anywhere.
They should be the most important person. That's who they married. That's who they chose to build a family with.
Okay. Well, what about the effect of your ex? So from a parental alienation perspective, we know that not only young children are vulnerable to parental alienation, but really children of any age are vulnerable to alienation once there's been a divorce. So sometimes the abusive and disrespectful behavior from the adult child could be a carryover from childhood, long-standing parental alienation, but it may also be more.
Could be. That's what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing carryover from childhood alienation. I know it. So it's tough. Part of me, it's kind of tough, on the alienation front, say, well, I'm different. But I know what my situation is. My situation has been going on now for 13 years. It is what it is.
More of a recent thing where the parents are divorced and the alienating parent blames the other parent for the divorce. They raise topics that they know that the adult child will feel upset about. Maybe they lie about things that the parent did when they were married, like they had affairs or they were abusive or that kind of thing. So in some ways they set the...
What if they're not lying? What if they're not lying? So then you're just giving legitimate abusers the tactics to gaslight their children.
The adult child on the other parent in a very aggressive way as a way to prove their loyalty, in the same way that this might occur with a troubled son-in-law or daughter-in-law. They may also have an unconscious loyalty to your ex, even if your ex...
Boy, he's really laying on that son-in-law, daughter-in-law thing, isn't he? Isn't he? Which is the worst thing to lean on, because you take a vow. Sickness and in health, till death do you part, whole thing. You don't take a vow to your parents. There is no vow before God or whoever to your parents. And this is what they don't like. This is what he won't say. The spouse should come first. That's how you build a family. That's how you build a good family. Not running back to worrying about what mommy and daddy want. Oh, the entitlement.
Isn't really trying to fan the flames of them. So they may feel protective of the ex in ways that are completely unfair to you, but for whatever reason, they feel like that ex has to be protected. And so they take on this role of, well, I'm going to, tell dad or mom, how screwed up they are and, why I can't have a relationship with them. I'm going to really stick it to them. And in their mind, they're sort of defending the other parent. Particularly if that parent likes that. But even if that other parent isn't acting like that, that they need that per se. That kind of...
So it can't ever be me. It's just if there's a divorce, it's the other parent. Zero responsibility. And he's talking about as adults. Again, you have no ability, none, to make your own decision whatsoever. To view a situation as an adult, as a rational thinking, as an intelligent adult, and make a decision to say, you know what? You're fucked up. You're an abuser. I don't want you in my life. Nope. It's all influence because you don't know any better. you're mentally ill, you're under this influence, you're under that influence. It's just like, it's every bag, they're pulling out every trick in the bag here.
That can still occur. So the X can be a very powerful form or influence of aggressive behavior, particularly if they're acting very victimized or wounded by the divorce, or they're revealing things that happened during the marriage that cause the adult child to be contemptuous of that other parent, or they indicate in some way that they like that, or the other parent has misrepresented who you are, what you did, or they lied about you, or they haven't corrected things that your child is saying. So let's say your child goes to therapy and the therapist says, well, maybe you were sexually molested, and the adult child takes that back to the parent, and the parent, who doesn't have any reason to believe that they were, says, well, yeah, maybe you were, even though if they were put to a lie detector test, they would say that they weren't. So they don't correct misperceptions of the other parent, and in that way.
So the therapist is put in, and I'm sure that can happen. I mean, there's bad therapists out there. But you're completely dismissing it?
Fuel and exacerbate the disrespect and abuse. Finally, some children are disrespectful or what feels like abusive because the parent just isn't really doing the work. They're not really making amends. They're not acknowledging legitimate complaints of the adult child. They're not
that's true.
They're not, being respectful to the adult child's boundaries in ways that are reasonable for the adult child to ask them to be. So they feel ignored by the parent, and they feel like they're responding in some ways to the parent's disrespectful or abusive behavior. So what I see sometimes happen is that the adult child starts out kind of trying to have that conversation, but if the parent is only defensive or critical or rejecting, or won't really find the kernel of truth, or won't show any kind of temperament towards really self-examination or self-reflection, then things do start to escalate, and then they get worse. Then instead of sometimes you were critical,
which is usually the case. We're 33 minutes 47 seconds into this. Now we're getting down to the root of it. Now we're after he's given a half hour of gaslighting tactics, he puts this at the end of the video.
It's like, you were always critical, and maybe it starts out calm, but now it's getting to be aggressive. So they may need to exaggerate their claims as a way to make them seem more legitimate. But an ironic cause of disrespect and abuse may actually, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about what I commonly see with adult daughters and single mothers, where they actually feel guilty towards the parent or worried about them, their unhappiness, how their lives are going or not going, the ways that they feel overly enmeshed with her, the way that they feel too responsible for making her happy or giving her companionship, and that kind of thing. And that the anger or the disrespect or the abuse is actually a way to have a boundary. And that's why for those children, when the mom in particular can set limits and show that she's strong enough to push back and set limits and not be mistreated, that creates its own boundary for the adult child in ways that are very, very useful, very relieving to
Again, he's talking about a mother who has been in competition with his daughter, expect the daughter to basically live in her life vicariously through the daughter, using friends of the daughter, that whole thing. And again, if you fight back and you take that I'm the mother, you could set up a boundary. What he's talking about is more gaslighting.
Adult child. I don't think that most of these kids really want to behave in the abuseful, disrespectful way that they are, even though they look like that. So a certain percentage of them are actually relieved when the parent does begin to set limits.
Bullshit. We wouldn't be standing up to you. We're not standing up for you, to you people, hoping, boy, I really hope they put me in check. Boy, I really hope they put up a boundary and make themselves out to be the victim. Like, that's delusional.
Okay, so that's sort of a theory of why this can happen and some of the common pathways to that.
Your theories all suck.
Talk from a practical perspective about what are sort of the best practices if you do have an abusive or disrespectful child. The first thing is that if you know you're going to have an interaction with your adult child, I know a lot of you have had no interaction, or it's been years, so you probably wouldn't even mind disrespect.
Right, which is my point. But just in case you come back, here's the bag of tricks you use.
Interaction at this point. But what I often find is that once people start practicing some of my techniques, not everybody, but many do end up having some contact. So you want to have the right principles in mind so that when the door does open back up, you know how to respond. Because sometimes the kids come back swinging. And I don't mean that in a musical sense. They come back, come back angry, but they're open to talking about it, but they come back, loaded for bear. So you want to have the right orientation.
Right, because we didn't get it all off our chest. Sometimes you just want to say it. Sometimes you just want to say it to them.
So that you can respond to them in a way that's
but if you do, and I understand that temptation, this is what's waiting for you. This is exactly what's waiting for you.
It's productive. Again, your goal is to respond in a way that keeps the conversation moving forward. So let's say you are anticipating some kind of interaction. You want to decide what you want to say before the interaction. What are your goals? Are there particular points that you want to make sure that you're going to make? You may want to write out to the 3 of the most important things that you want to say. If you're particularly nervous, practice saying them out loud. There's no harm in that. On the other hand, have an exit plan. How are you going to get off the phone or away from the interaction if and when it starts to head south? It can be useful to consider prefacing the conversation with some ground rules if things haven't gone well in the past. You might say something like, seems like past few times we've talked hasn't gone very well. You want to sort of talk about it from what you see there.
No, you don't get to set up ground rules. No, you don't get ground rules. You're the abusers. You don't get to set up ground rules. That's what it is. See, he's already given them the leeway to make themselves into the victim. Now they think they're entitled to start setting up ground rules. No, you don't get to do that. This is why it's not worth it. Leave them estranged. Leave them on YouTube in their stupid support groups licking each other's wounds, because this is the shit that's waiting for you.
Dilemma is being, and kind of give them a graceful way of showing that you understand or may understand why they communicate in the way that they do. So you might say something like, well, I get that maybe you feel like I haven't done a good job listening in the past. And you may feel like you kind of need to hit me over the head with it for me to get through to me. And maybe that was true historically. But I want to see if you and I can have a different, more productive conversation. So, maybe you could just try to tell me what you want to say in a low-key way. I promise to listen and respond in a respectful way. So, while I want to understand what you're saying, it is hard for me to focus on what you're saying when you raise your voice, when you get really mad at me, when you start calling me names. I don't know, just some part of my brain starts to shut down. So if you could just try to say whatever it is, in a calm, respectful way, I promise you I will try to respond in a way that is going to feel productive to you as well. And you can sort of model it. You can say to them something like, well, you can say to me, I think you're a terrible dad, or I think it was your fault, the family split up, or, whatever. But, as long as you say it calmly, I'm happy to listen to it. Not happy, but I'm willing to listen to it. But you can't call me names, can't yell at me. Let's just have some kind of basic ground rules. So now, so let's say that you set those ground rules, but then pretty quickly it starts to devolve into something much more chaotic and disrespectful and hurtful and problematic. So you probably at that point need to set limits. You might say, look, why don't we take a timeout and both of us just get off the phone or remove ourselves from the situation for an hour or so. And once we're both calm, get back on the call. Maybe we should just resume it tomorrow. And the goal of a timeout is really just to calm down. It's not to prove yourself right. If your kid refuses to do that.
A timeout, like a child, like a child. Again, they will never not treat you like a child. Never.
And they continue to escalate. You can say, well, this actually isn't feeling productive to me. So I'm going to either hang up or I'm going to leave. If you want to talk about it more tomorrow, I'm happy to do that, but this doesn't feel very good to me. It can't feel that good to you. Now, then you want to follow up within 24 hours and just say, checking back in with you, wanted to see if you wanted to try again, see if we could do a better job this time than the last time. I know I got kind of triggered. I think you might have as well. I don't know. You could say what you felt, but I know it probably wasn't as productive as either one of us would like it to be. Now, if you don't feel like it can be productive, you might suggest that you continue it over email, but just suggest that it's very short. You don't want to read one of these freaking long diatribes that I often see from these adult children to the parents telling them that they're narcissists or borderline.
Oh, a long. Yeah, we want to keep it short so you can't get everything off your chest. And is he going with the narcissism thing? I think he is. Let me back that up. Go.
Checking back in with you, wanted to see if you wanted to try again, see if we could do a better job this time than the last time. I know I got kind of triggered. I think you might have as well. I don't know. You could say what you felt, but I know it probably wasn't as productive as either one of us would like it to be. Now, if you don't feel like it can be productive, you might suggest that you continue it over email, but just suggest that it's very short. You don't want to read one of these freaking long diatribes that I often see from these adult children to the parents telling them that they're narcissists or borderlines or gaslighters or whatever it is.
There it is. All to avoid being called what they are. Narcissists, borderline, and gaslighters. Meanwhile, he just said in the video, we're the ones with borderline personality disorder. But you're not allowed to put your feelings in a long email detailing your abuse, saying you're a narcissist, you're a borderline, you're a gaslighter. Rules for thee, not for me. This is what's waiting for you, people. This is what's waiting for you. Don't fall for it.
You want to just say, why don't you and I each write a paragraph back and forth?
No, a paragraph. So you could take that. Listen, they could take one sentence and twist it around and make you feel like there's something wrong with you. No. They don't want the conversation. This isn't honest. This isn't honest at all. He's giving them the best tactics to turn it around and to turn themselves into victims and make you feel like you're crazy. I don't want a long email with diet. Like, pound sand, buddy. I don't want to hear it. What he's saying is, I don't want to hear it. Because I don't want you holding that mirror up to my face. That's what he's telling you.
Respectfully respond to what the other said. Let's see if we can really get somewhere doing that. Okay. Now, what about after the fact? Because typically, if you're like most parents, after you have these kind of interactions, you're probably going to feel miserable. You're not only going to still be angry, but you are probably going to feel really hurt and scared that things are going in the wrong direction, or you may never talk to you again.
I bet you're scared. You're scared you're going to get exposed. That's the only thing that you're afraid of, is exposure and having that mirror held up to your face. That's what this is all about.
Regret what you did. You could think, you'll probably be thinking, what could I have done differently? What should I have done differently? Do I deserve to be treated like this? Where did I go wrong? Is this my fault that my kid feels like they have the right to talk to me in this way or treat me in this way? And so how do you counter that? Well, there's a number of different things that you can do. One is to remind yourself of your own good intentions. You might say to yourself, or you write it out, look, my goal was to have a closer relationship with my child, and it continues to be my goal. Second of all, if you did blow it, if you did lose your temper, if you did say all the things that parents want to say to their kids, but hopefully don't,
What things? All the things that you had been saying that got you estranged in the first place. All your typical behaviors, which is why we're pissed and cut you out of our lives. That's what you're talking about.
Forgive yourself if you blew it. You should say to yourself, look, I probably shouldn't have told them that they're a selfish jerk, but I got really provoked and I understand why I did it. Hopefully next time I'll be able to do a better job than I did on this call. I guess I got kind of caught up in the moment and in the quicksand, and it's understandable why I did. I'm willing to make amends, and that's the gold standard. I'm not going to punish myself or shame myself or ridicule myself or torment myself about this. I'm already doing way too much of that. It can also be useful after a fight to engage in some kind of a self-soothing activity. Because after a fight, our nervous systems are probably still very activated in kind of a fight or flight mode. So for me, that's probably going to mean going for a run or turning on really loud music. But for you, it might be meditating or sitting in a quiet room or going for a drive or doing something to really calm down. there's a technique that I teach in my workshop about healing the pain that I borrowed from Marsha Linehan, who's the founder of dialectical behavior therapy, where she invites you, if you're feeling really upset and you can't calm yourself down, to get a big bowl of ice water or a baggie and fill it with ice and water. And then if it's in the bowl, you put your face in it for like 30 seconds and hold your breath. And what it does is it activates.
Who's being performative? We're the ones. He's accusing us of being performative for standing up to them. They're shoving their heads in ice bowls. But we're the ones being performative. They accuse you of everything of what they are, without fail.
Activates the mammalian dive reflex, which causes your body to go in this much more relaxed state. You can also do that by putting a bag of ice water on your face and lie back and holding it there for 30 seconds and doing that a couple of times. You might want to try it because it really does work. So in all these situations that I'm advising in terms of how to respond, you want to do something that's going to basically change the neural network that's been activated through the fight. So through the argument, right? So you want to get out of the fight flight mode into something that's much more regulating. So that's why, exercise, forms of distraction, ice water, call a friend, vent to somebody, write it out in a journal. Writing out can be enormously therapeutic. There's something.
So they can vent, they can do these things. You're not allowed to. It's performative when you do it. Oh, Hollywood screenwriters couldn't write this shit. I'm telling you.
About writing things out just feels like you're getting it one step away from yourself, which can be.
Well, don't make it too long. Don't make it too long, right? Just keep it a paragraph.
Incredibly therapeutic, and it can help you to analyze what happened. Finally, it can be useful to, in my book, When Parents Hurt, I have an exercise called my value as a parent. And in that, I would want you to write out 10 things that are valuable about you as a parent. Now, if you're in the midst of an estrangement or alienation, you may be more filled with self-criticism and self-loathing and regret and shame and guilt. Well, screw all that. You have to own your own narrative of who you are as a person and as a parent, and you cannot cede that precious territory to your child. I don't care how great your kid was or is, they don't deserve to ruin your life. Nobody deserves to ruin your life. And so one of the ways to reclaim your...
Exactly. Nobody deserves to ruin your life. Nobody's entitled to ruin your life. Yet you've done your damnedest to ruin all of ours. Zero accountability.
Your definition of your parent is not to buy into whatever your kid's saying. I mean, that's why parents write amends letter. It's kind of like, yeah, these are mistakes I made. I'm really sorry. I can see why you'd be upset about that. And that's very different than saying, yes, but I deserve to hate myself or shame myself or have this ruin my life or have this be this black cloud that follows me everywhere.
They never write I'd love to get an amends letter. We'd love to get an amends letter. None of us have ever seen one. Anybody, please put it in the comments section if you've ever gotten an amends letter from your abuser. Please. Fantasy world he's talking about here.
I go, no, your kid does not deserve to ruin your life like that. You have to take control of it.
We ruined their lives. I mean, it's the balls.
Narrative. And one of the ways to take control over the narrative is to write out 10 things that you did right as a parent. So I think at the end of this call, that's what you should do. You should get up.
It's not your call to make what you did right. How do you know what you did right? You don't even know what you did wrong. How do you know what you did right?
Piece of paper and write it out by hand and just 10 things. I was better parent than my parents were, or I was as good a parent as my parents were.
How do you know that? That's all subjective. That's bullshit.
Or I left an unhappy marriage to protect my children, or I stayed married to protect my children from a divorce, or I got into my own therapy, or I got my kid into their own therapy, or I made sacrifices for my kid nobody made for me, or I spent a lot of money on them, or I took classes, or I'm doing this workshop. I mean,
I spent a lot of money again. The boomers love bringing up the money thing, don't they?
You should be able to come up with 10 things that are valuable about you as a parent.
Those are things you're supposed to do. So again, they want credit for things they're supposed to do. It's not how it works.
And whatever your mistakes were, I don't care. That's not the purpose of this exercise.
Whatever your mistakes are, I don't care. It's not the purpose of this exercise. It should be.
Purpose of this exercise
The mistakes as you're calling them, not the abuse, the mistakes. Wrong.
is you're reclaiming your value as a parent. Okay, well, that concludes today's webinar. I hope this was helpful to you.
I'm sure it was very helpful to a lot of abusers. 2,268 comments. Can't believe so many people are going through this. At work, I hear coworkers talking about how wonderful their kids are, willing to visit them all the time. It's horrifying to be estranged from my daughter. I have grandchildren I'm missing out on. I was distraught for years. Went to and still in counseling. Gatekeeper daughter-in-laws literally poisoned my son. You have no idea how comforting this lecture is. I've struggled over 30 years with a broken relationship with my daughter. 30 years. She ain't coming back. She ain't coming back. There is nobody who hasn't made a mistake. Kids who overpunish their parents are really people who choose to act out. My mom wasn't perfect. I never mistreated her. Like Jesus, they want to decide what their they want to decide. They want to abuse you and then decide what the consequences should be. That is not how this works. You don't like it? That's just too bad. So, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Joan, for the contribution. I really appreciate it, and thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, something you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up a Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with either the Cash App, Zelle, PayPal, and email links in the description box below. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. Also, be sure to subscribe to both my channels on Rumble. Follow me on Twitter and Telegram as well. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been Societal Narcissism. Take care, everyone.